Right now, there's a squirrel somewhere near your house who has already decided something about you, and you have no idea what it is. Welcome back to Squirrelology, where we take backyard squirrels a lot more seriously than most people think they deserve. Today we're going deep into 8 signs of squirrel psychology that most people walk past every single day without noticing. And I want to warn you now, sign 5 is going to change the way you look at your bird feeder forever. And sign 8 is the one that gets people messaging me at 2 in the morning saying they had to stop and just sit outside for a minute. So stick with me, because by the end of this, you will never watch a squirrel bury a nut the same way again. Let's start with something happening in your yard that looks like nothing. Sign number 1 is the fake burial, and it might be the single most underrated piece of animal behavior on the planet. A squirrel digs a hole, drops its head down like it's stashing a nut, pats the dirt back into place, and moves on. Except sometimes there's no nut. It never left the squirrel's mouth. The whole thing was theater. Dr. Michael Steele at Wilkes University has spent years studying this exact behavior in fox squirrels and gray squirrels. And what he found is that when squirrels sense they're being watched, especially by another squirrel who might steal their stash, they will fake the entire burial process to throw the observer off. This is an instinct running on autopilot. This is a squirrel making a real-time decision about who's watching and what that audience might do next. Try this tomorrow. Sit still near a spot where squirrels are actively caching food, close enough to observe but far enough that you're not the disturbance, and count how many times a squirrel glances over its shoulder before it commits to a real burial versus a fake one. You will start to see the tell. There's a pause, a little extra vigilance, almost a performance quality to it. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. What you're witnessing is a small animal weighing your presence, weighing the presence of its rivals, and adjusting its behavior to protect a future it hasn't even reached yet. That is not simple. That is strategy. Sign number 2 lies in the tail, and almost nobody clocks it correctly. You've seen a squirrel's tail flick violently while it's on the ground, that fast, almost aggressive flaring motion. Most people assume that's excitement or agitation with no real target. It's actually a warning broadcast. Researchers studying squirrel communication have documented that tail flagging combined with a specific alarm call functions as a directional signal to other squirrels about where a predator is and sometimes what kind of predator it is, ground-based versus aerial. The tail isn't decoration. It's a flag on a pole, and the squirrel is raising it deliberately. Here's your challenge for this one. Next time you hear a squirrel making that sharp, almost electric chattering sound, don't look at the squirrel first. Look at what the squirrel is looking at. Follow the direction its body is angled, because that tail and that call are pointed at something specific, a hawk overhead, a neighborhood cat, sometimes even you if you got too close too fast. What's happening in that moment is a small animal risking its own exposure to protect squirrels it may not even be related to. It is standing in the open, making noise, making itself visible, specifically because something else needs to know danger is near. That is not paranoia. That is a warning system with a conscience built into it. Sign number 3 is the one that made me completely rethink how I saw memory in animals, and it comes from the incredible research of Dr. Lucia Jacobs at UC Berkeley. A single gray squirrel can cache several thousand nuts in a single season, scattered across dozens or even hundreds of locations, and then recover a striking number of them months later, under snow, after the landscape has changed, using spatial memory strategies that researchers compare to how humans navigate using landmarks and mental mapping. This isn't smell doing all the work, though smell plays a role at close range. The heavy lifting is memory, an internal map built moment by moment as the squirrel buries each item, encoding not just the location, but sometimes prioritizing which nuts to recover first based on nutritional value. Try this tomorrow, and it's a small thing, but it will blow your mind. Watch one squirrel bury 3 or 4 nuts in different spots in your yard, and try to remember the locations yourself. Then come back in a week and see how many you can find without any markers. You'll probably manage 1, maybe 2, and you have a notebook and a phone camera. That squirrel is running that same task at a scale of thousands, with nothing but its own brain in an environment that keeps shifting under falling leaves and shifting snow. What you're looking at is not a foraging animal poking around at random. You're looking at a small creature carrying an enormous invisible map behind its eyes, all day, every day, and somehow never asking for a break. And before we get to sign 4, I want you to hold on to this because sign 5 is going to take everything we just said about memory and turn it into something almost unsettling in how personal it gets. And sign 6 is going to explain why some squirrels seem to like certain people and not others, so don't go anywhere. Sign number 4 is about risk assessment, and it's one of those behaviors that looks like nervousness, but is actually closer to a live calculation happening in real time. DR. Mikel Delgado, who has studied squirrel behavior extensively, including work connected to UC Davis and UC Berkeley, has documented how squirrels adjust their caching behavior based on perceived threat level, burying food faster and less carefully when they sense they're being watched by a potential thief, and taking their time, digging deeper, choosing more hidden spots when the coast feels clear. This is called risk-based decision-making, and it means the squirrel isn't just reacting to danger after it happens. It's pricing danger in before it acts. Try this tomorrow. Watch how a squirrel's caching speed changes depending on whether other squirrels or birds are nearby versus when it thinks it's alone. You'll notice quick, almost sloppy burials in a crowd, and slow, careful, deliberate ones in solitude. That difference is the squirrel doing cost-benefit math with its own limited time and energy, deciding in the moment how much effort a hiding spot deserves based on who might be watching. It is running a version of the same logic you use when you decide whether to say something out loud in a quiet room versus a loud one. That is not a coincidence of behavior. That is a shared logic of caution. Sign number 5 is the one I promised you, and it's about play, specifically about the chasing behavior you've probably dismissed as squirrels fighting over territory or a mate. A lot of what looks like aggressive chasing in squirrels, especially among juveniles and in certain social contexts, functions as play, and play in animals is now understood by behavioral researchers as a way of building physical skill, testing social boundaries, and in some species even strengthening social bonds between individuals who will interact again later. This matters because for a long time, popular thinking treated squirrels as almost entirely solitary, transactional animals with no real social depth. That picture is incomplete. Try this tomorrow. Watch a chase between two squirrels closely and note whether it includes pauses, role reversals where the chaser becomes the chased, and a lack of biting or real aggression at contact. Genuine fights are fast, tense, and end quickly. Play chases loop, they repeat. They include moments that look almost choreographed. What you're watching, when it's play, is two small animals choosing to spend energy on each other with no immediate food reward at stake. In a world governed by survival math, that is not nothing. That is closer to friendship than we've historically been willing to admit. Sign number 6 is about faces, specifically yours. Squirrels are capable of recognizing individual humans, and multiple informal and academic observations of urban and suburban squirrel populations support the idea that squirrels can learn to distinguish a person who reliably provides food from someone who doesn't, sometimes approaching the former with noticeably less caution while maintaining full flight distance from strangers. This isn't about squirrels loving you. It's about squirrels running a fast risk versus reward assessment based on accumulated experience with your specific presence, your gait, sometimes even the time of day you tend to appear. Try this tomorrow. If you have a squirrel that visits regularly, wears something different than usual, a hat you don't normally wear, a different color jacket, and see if its behavior toward you shifts even slightly, more hesitation, a longer pause before approaching. That tiny hesitation is data. It means the squirrel had built a profile of you, not just of human, but of you specifically, and your appearance just didn't match the file. Somewhere in that small skull is a working memory of a person, updated visit by visit. That is not blind habituation. That is recognition. Sign number 7 is about problem solving under pressure. And this is where squirrels start to look less like foragers and more like engineers. Squirrels have been observed defeating so-called squirrel-proof bird feeders through repeated trial and error, adjusting their approach after failed attempts, and eventually solving mechanical problems, weight-triggered levers, twisting mechanisms, multi-step barriers that were specifically designed by humans to be unsolvable. Researchers who study animal cognition point to this kind of persistent, adaptive problem solving as evidence of genuine behavioral flexibility rather than fixed instinct. A squirrel that fails at a feeder doesn't give up and doesn't repeat the exact same failed motion forever. It adjusts. It tries a different angle, a different limb, a different approach to the same obstacle. Try this tomorrow. If you've got a feeder a squirrel hasn't cracked yet, just watch one full attempt from start to finish without intervening. Count how many distinct strategies it tries before either succeeding or giving up for the day. You'll likely see more variation than you expect. This is not one repeated motion. It's a small creature auditioning solutions. What you're watching is a wild mind doing something remarkably close to engineering, testing a hypothesis, discarding it, testing another. That feeder you bought to keep the squirrel out has become, without your permission, a genuine cognitive experiment happening in your backyard for free. Now we get to sign number 8, and I want you to actually slow down for this one, because it's different from the rest. If you've lost someone recently, or if your days have gotten quiet in a way you didn't choose, you may have noticed something small and strange. A particular squirrel starts showing up at roughly the same time each day. It sits a little closer than the others. It watches you rather than the food. Some people feel almost foolish admitting they've started to feel a kind of companionship with an animal that, on paper, is just optimizing its caloric intake near a reliable source. I want to tell you that feeling is not foolish, and it is not entirely one-sided either. What's actually happening is built on everything we've already talked about today, that individual recognition from sign 6, that risk assessment from sign 4, that spatial memory from sign 3, all of it compounding over repeated, predictable interactions with you specifically. A squirrel that returns to the same person at the same time day after day has run its own quiet calculation across dozens of encounters and concluded that this particular human, in this particular spot, represents safety and reliability worth returning to. That is not affection in the way we experience affection with another person, and I won't pretend it is, because pretending would cheapen both what the squirrel is actually doing and what you're actually feeling. But it is real. It is a small animal choosing proximity to you, repeatedly, based on evidence it has gathered about who you are and how you behave. For someone whose days have gotten quieter than they used to be, that small, patient repetition of trust can matter more than it has any logical right to. The squirrel is not lonely in the way people are lonely, but it is, in its own limited and completely genuine way, keeping a kind of appointment with you. And the honest, grounded, science-backed version of what that means is this. That squirrel has built a working memory of you as a safe, predictable part of its world, and it is choosing deliberately and repeatedly to include you in its daily map of the places and people worth returning to. So here's what I want from you in the comments. Tell me the one thing your backyard squirrel does that you can't explain, the behavior that made you stop and go, wait, why did it just do that? I read every single one. And honestly, some of my best ideas for future videos have come straight from your comments. If this changed how you're going to look at the next squirrel you see, send it to the one friend who always makes fun of you for caring this much about squirrels. Let's see what they say after they watch it. And if you want more of this, hit subscribe, because we go deeper into the hidden minds of the animals living right outside your window every single week. This has been Squirrelology, and I'll see you in the next one.